All right, let's just jump right in. Today, we're doing an explainer that completely dismantles a deeply ingrained academic dogma. Seriously, if you've ever been in a grad program or, tried to publish a paper, you already know the golden rule, right? Before you generate any new ideas, you absolutely must do a comprehensive literature review. You got to read widely, identify the gaps, map the terrain, the whole shebang. But what if that exact practice is actually destroying your ability to come up with genuinely original ideas? It sounds crazy, but we are unpacking a fascinating source today by Mohammed Ra'eh called Beyond Inductive Obligation. And he argues that this literature-first approach is actually phenomenologically self-defeating, which is basically a fancy way of saying the actual lived experience of doing a literature review wrecks the exact mindset you need to create truly novel work. So here is our roadmap. First, we'll look at the literature review myth, then dive into the problem with conceptual induction. After that, we'll check out history's true generative sequences, explore these 7 stages of origination, and finally, look at repositioning the literature review. Okay, section 1, the literature review myth, challenging the axiom. Let's get into it. So we're all taught that to be rigorous, we have to immerse ourselves in the literature first, right? But to really understand why that's a trap, we need to take a step back and look at what induction actually is. The source makes a really critical distinction here, starting with empirical induction. Now, this is the process of drawing generalizations from observed phenomena, regularities in data, patterns across cases, reoccurring features in the natural world. This is the standard induction we see in natural sciences and quantitative research. And honestly, it's totally valid. It's absolutely valid when your object of inquiry is the actual physical world. The only real risk here is just the classic problem of overgeneralizing from a limited set of data. But here is where the problem happens. Things go off the rails when we confuse empirical induction with conceptual induction. Conceptual induction is when we try to derive new theoretical frameworks directly from the existing literature. The object of inquiry isn't the real world anymore. It's the conceptual archive of a given field. When you begin by inducting from the literature, you are effectively letting the field's current possibility space completely define the boundaries of your own imagination. Instead of building a genuinely new architecture, you end up with derivative theory. You're basically just rearranging the furniture in a house that someone else already built. Moving on to section 2, the problem with conceptual induction, filling versus emptying. So the crucial point here is that forcing a literature review at the very start creates a massive cognitive bottleneck. To explain why, the author brings in this brilliant Zen paradox from Shunryu Suzuki. It goes, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. This perfectly captures the required state for creativity. Beginner's mind doesn't mean ignorance, okay? It means an achieved state of perceptual openness. It's a state completely free from the premature categorization that expert knowledge imposes on us. To create something completely new, it turns out you actually need to deliberately loosen your grip on your expert commitments. And here is the phenomenological clash we run into. You simply cannot fill and empty your mind at the exact same time. It's literally impossible. A literature review is a filling operation. It populates your mind with the field's current categories, the ongoing debates, the established associative pathways. It anchors you down. But on the flip side, the beginner's mind requires a deliberate cognitive emptying, holding your expertise super lightly so that something unexpected can actually emerge. Because of this, conducting a literature review primes your brain with existing grammar, making it the absolute worst starting condition if you're trying to build a completely original conceptual architecture. All right, section 3. History's true generative sequences, the empirical evidence. Now, you might be wondering, if the literature-first approach is so fundamentally flawed, how did the most famous theories in history actually come about? Well, let's look at the data. To test this, the source analyzes a representative set of 40 highly influential theories across 4 major fields: psychology, sociology, leadership studies, and cognitive science. The goal was to see if the most influential minds actually followed this golden rule of literature-first induction. Did they really start in the library? Looking at a sample from these 40 major theories, the findings are honestly stunning. Take Freud's psychoanalysis. That was driven by clinical observation and self-analysis, not a literature review. Or in cognitive science, Forder's modularity of mind, that was constructed deductively from linguistics and philosophy. And perhaps most ironically of all, Glasser and Strauss's grounded theory, which is basically considered the holy grail of inductive methodology, it explicitly prohibited literature-first induction by design. Seriously, Glasser actively warned against contaminating your brain with prior frameworks. Get this. Out of the 40 major theories analyzed across all 4 disciplines, Exactly 0 relied on literature-first conceptual induction. 0, not a single one. Some use empirical or clinical data, sure. Some use logical deduction or philosophical synthesis. But absolutely none of these towering intellectual achievements began by synthesizing a literature review just to find a gap to fill. And to back up this historical data, Rai points to two fascinating modern cases where we actually have first-person, real-time documentation. First is the 5D metatheory, which was discovered completely serendipitously through practical use. It's kind of like how blood pressure medication unexpectedly became the hair loss drug Rogaine. And second, the M3 innovation topology, which emerged from structural intuition and isomorphic patterning. Neither of these came from synthesizing old literature. They both required a radically open cognitive state. It just goes to show that high-level abstract frameworks emerge laterally from open attention, not from gap spotting in a library. Which brings us to Section 4, 7 Stages of Origination, an alternative generative sequence. So, if we don't start with the literature, where do we start? Well, this 7-stage sequence maps out how great ideas actually travel from an emptied mind into structured reality. You literally start at stage 0 and 1, emptying your mind and loosening your expert commitments to achieve a beginner's mind. That openness allows for stage 2, the abductive opening, that lateral aha moment. Then you structure and test the logic in stages 3 and 4. And what blew my mind here is that this perfectly mirrors Otto Scharmer's theory U in organizational learning. You have to let go of downloaded past patterns before new things can come. Notice anything else? It's only after the architecture is completely built that we finally arrive at the literature in stages 5 and 6. That leads perfectly into Section 5, repositioning the literature review, the expert's exception. Now, before we go throwing out our textbooks entirely, we need to clarify something important. The literature review is not dead. It just needs a new home. You see, the rule fundamentally shifts based on your level of expertise. A novice absolutely must do a literature review. For them, it performs a vital capacity-building function. It builds their vocabulary and conceptual infrastructure. The novice needs to fill their mind before they can contribute. But an expert has already absorbed the field. The literature already lives inside them as a sort of disciplinary sensibility. To innovate, the expert must temporarily forget it. Doing a formal review refills what they must empty, and that blocks their creative process entirely. So, where does the literature review actually belong for the expert? Right at the very end, in stages 5 and 6. Its true role is twofold. First, to situate. It locates your newly formed framework within the existing conversation and identifies your conceptual neighbors. Second, to confirm novelty. It verifies that your new idea isn't just a rediscovery of something already established. So the next time a peer reviewer asks, "Hey, where is your literature review?" you can confidently tell them it sits exactly where it belongs, right after the creative work is done. To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this thought. The field has completely mistaken a sometimes useful path for the absolutely required path. And in doing so, we've created a massive roadblock for true innovation. If we've institutionalized a method that literally forecloses the beginner's mind, what else do we need to unlearn to truly create? Think about the routines and best practices in your own work right now. Are they actually helping you generate the future, or are they just trapping you in the past?